Welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to look at regular and irregular verbs. What I really love about this is you can pick up the actual challenges when you think of a little child learning to speak English. Now, this lesson is for grade 9s, but it's something that we could all use to practice. You know that with language, we always find their rules, and then we have the rule says this, but we do know that there are exceptions to any rules, and that is why we have to learn by practice. So let's look at what a regular verb would be. And if you think of anything, remember what is a verb first of all? It's an action word or a doing word. And if you can form the simple past tense and the past participle of a verb simply by adding ed to it or just a d to it, then it's a regular verb. And then our challenge comes in when it's anything else, because sometimes these verbs just don't look the same at all and they change completely or they remain the same. And then you're not sure what to do. You might remember when you were learning to speak English, and it's actually quite a challenge, because a little child will say, I take food to school. And then if they ask him, what did you do yesterday? And then he'll say, I taked. And he puts an ed behind it, because when you're small and you're learning a language, you think that all the past tense is formed in the same way. So the child would probably say, I taked my lunch tin with yesterday, or, something like that. Or even if they get to the past participle, say something like, I tooked. So there are a lot of funny ways we can say things because we don't know, we haven't practiced. So let's look. If you can form the simple past tense and the past participle of a verb by adding ed or d, then it's a regular verb. But you have to know your pronouns to be able to see whether the verb stays the way it is or changes slightly. You think of wash. I wash my hands. But what would happen if I said she wash? I can't say she wash her hands. She washes her hands. When we go to the past, we would say, I washed my hands, or she washed her hands. When we look at the past participle, the past participle is actually linked to, we use it in reported speech when we say we're reporting on the past tense, but it's going further into the past. And that's usually when we add had in front of have, or else if it was going to be the present, then it would be have. So we would say, I had washed my hands. So you see that those of you who can remember your rules for your reported speech, it takes a step further. I had washed my hands. You think of walk. I walked to school. She walks to school. They walk to school. I walked to school would be my past tense. She walked to school, or they walked to school. And the same with in our past participle. If we put had in, I had walked. Now we can link these to our time words. He talks to his friends. Yesterday he talked to his friends. But if we go further and we say last week or last year he had talked to his friends, then we're using the past participle. Watch, I watch television. Yesterday I watched television, and a week ago I had watched television. Now this comes from our book of this handbook and study guide, the English one, the red and the yellow booklet. And this is about the past participle. And the reason we're looking at it as well is because it is so closely related to the correct form of the verb. Just below that, I have put in for you that the verb to have in the present tense and the past tense, I have or I had. And if we look at he and she and it has, but you, we, and they have. Now, if you don't know your pronouns, you won't be able to figure out whether or not you're using the correct form when you get to something like the past participles. Now, let's look at the irregular verbs. This is a verb that doesn't follow the simple pattern of just adding an ed or a d. And part of this challenge is because English is a very old language. So the older things land up pretty irregular, and most of the newer words take ED. But you need to also be aware of the time words for the verbs to change. Now, if I cannot take an ED or D in the past tense, then it becomes irregular. Let's take a word like take. When you were learning English, remember I said you would say, I taked sweets to school yesterday, but you can see that it's incorrect. So you would have had to change it completely. It's an irregular verb. Take becomes took. Yesterday, I took sweets to school. Okay, but tell me now. Now we get to the past participle, and I say last week why don't I say last week I took sweets to school? You hear? It sounds totally ridiculous. Last week I had taken sweets to school. And because these are verbs that you need to study, the only way to study them is going to be to practice using them. In the handbook and study guide, there's a list of different ones, and here you can see them. It starts with the present. Today, I am going to the shops. Yesterday, I was going to the shops, and last week, we would say, I have been to the shops, or I had been to the shops. So we can look at the different ways these are used. So we're going to change using the have or had. I have underlined only 4 here that we can look at. And what I really love about this is if you look at go down the list in the second set. If you look at a word like learn can have an ed as the ending. It can be learned or learnt with a T at the end. So you'll see that a lot of them change completely from the present to the past, and some of them stay exactly the same in the past. I really love those that don't change at all, but we'll have a look at them now. You don't need to learn it like a parrot. You need to practice using the examples. You take something like sing. You see that it becomes sing, sang, sung. You sing a beautiful song. Yesterday you sang a beautiful song. But last year you had sung a beautiful song. Or you have sung a beautiful song. Something that you need to remember as well, and this is one that I really find fascinating because so many people get it wrong. When we speak of hanging clothes, I hang my dress on a coat hanger, then I would say, yesterday I hung my dress on the coat hanger and I had hung it on the coat hanger. But if we're speaking about someone in an execution, this is a terrible topic to have, but in an execution of someone who is going to be hanged until they die, then it becomes hanged. It isn't then hung. People aren't hung until they die. They are hanged. So you see, every now and then there's a little bit of a twist to the rules. Let's look at things like build becomes built, kneel becomes knelt, and spin becomes spun. So we have all these changes that happen, but you need to practice and you need to use them. It doesn't just help you to look at this list. Take this list and make up sentences that make sense with what you want to say so that you use it in the present, in the past, and as a past participle. Now, here we have some that change completely, like go, went, and gone. I go to town. Yesterday, I went to town, and last week, I had gone to town. Then read becomes, yesterday, I read my favorite book, and last year, I had read a few books. So even though the spelling of the word stays the same, you will notice here that the word is pronounced differently, and that is something we need to take note of. A very silly rhyme that most learners grew up with is Polly put the kettle on. Yesterday Polly put the kettle on, but last week Polly had put the kettle on. I apologize for leaving the had out. So it can stay the same. So some words will stay the same. Their spelling stays the same as well. And there's only one way to learn this, and that is to practice, because we all know that practice makes perfect. So you can go and look in the handbook and study guide, and you will see all of these. Now, I remember at one stage we were thrown under paper at school and you were given these lists. And you looked at them and you thought, what on earth is this about? So go and use them, make up sentences. You don't have to write them down, you can say them out loud. And that way you can make sure that you know the most commonly used irregular verbs. Then remember what I said, practice makes perfect. So what we want from you is to go and make sure that everything that you learn or see here, that you go and apply it to make sure you understand how to use it. If you're an athlete and you don't train, you will not have any success at all. But if you're an athlete and you train, you are going to become a champion. If you use your English and you keep on practicing it, you will become a champion at your English. Thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon. Thanks. Bye-bye.